Disclaimer: this video contains spoilers. The traitor isn't human. When the prologue ends, a cutscene starts, which depicts the traitor coming to your aid by holding out his hand to help you stand. If you look at his arm, you can see the strands of what I can only assume to be mycelium, which are the thread-like filaments from mushrooms. This and the fact that he can bring you all the way back to the dry meadow hideout while chompers attack in the old woods at night are the first examples that the traitor is not human, and more examples will be discussed in the lower levels of the iceberg. We were unconscious for days. When the protagonist wakes up on day 0, he makes a comment about the bear trap, which is, quote unquote, the bear trap under the window is still open. Looks like tonight was exceptionally uneventful. This is a very curious observation to make, considering last night he survived multiple black chompers and was only saved by the traitor. On top of this, it seems like he has a hard time recognizing the traitor when he first sees him, saying things like, quote unquote, I can barely make out his disturbingly familiar features. This leads me to two questions. How long has it been since the prologue, and was the prologue even real? We know for a fact the prologue was real because the missing pages from our journal and the missing 21 key were stolen by the doctor, as well as the fact that when we revisit the doctor's house, quote unquote Janek can be found dead in the same location where you attacked him. However, the biggest hint I found that indicates the stranger was unconscious for days is when he writes, I don't know how I managed to escape his hut and end up here, in his journal. He also says this when he steps into the workbench room. Yesterday I barricaded one of the windows. If I want to stay here for some time, I should do the same with the other windows. This indicates that at the minimum there was 1 day between the prologue and waking up in Hideout 1. The use of mushrooms. Hideout 1 has a wardrobe with a book inside that is titled The Use of Mushrooms in the Household. This book presumably taught the protagonist how to inject himself with mushrooms. This is another example of how the prologue could be a memory that the protagonist is hallucinating in, with the black chompers being a stand-in for villagers attacking like depicted in future dreams after injecting yourself with a syringe that is similar to the one the doctor used on you in the prologue. This book actually exists and was made back in 1928. However, I doubt it has anything to do with the lore and I can't read Polish. The Hideout 1 container. Hideout 1 has a container outside its walls which is locked with a combination code. This combination cannot be found in-game. It was a reward for people who donated to Acid Wizard's Indiegogo campaign. The code is 2919, but some of you probably knew that. So here's a fun fact for you. In the alpha version of the game, the code isn't 2919. If you find out the combination code for the alpha version of Darkwood, please tell us in the comments. There is also a theory which implies that an unworn hazmat suit is inside this container, which can only be seen once opened. You are not human. When you first meet the Wolfman, he makes a comment about you which is, quote unquote, even from afar I can smell your putrid stench. Be glad I don't have an appetite for carcasses meat. Most people interpret this as the Wolfman saying you are so unappetizing that you might as well be a corpse. However, this is the first indication that the protagonist is not a human, because the infection in-game appears to warp living and dead matter together. Some of you may pose that the reason why the Wolfman says the protagonist has a putrid stench is because of the oven in the hideouts. When you interact with the oven for the first time, it reads, it's the smell of the protective substance. And if you examine the oven, the protagonist states, quote unquote, the inhabitants of these woods don't need to inhale this revolting gas. The reason why I believe that Wolfman is not referring to this gas is because of how he uses the word, quote unquote, carcasses, and the comment he makes when you show him the wedding invitation. Quote unquote, just remember to hide that disaster of a face, which implies there is something physically wrong with our protagonist. The wedding. The first and most prominent idea about the wedding is that it's related to the hunter and his wife, which would be the pretty lady. However, this doesn't correlate with the chomper we fight there, which is already wearing a wedding dress. It's clear that the Wolfman knows about this wedding since he makes this statement. Quote unquote, the music there has been playing non-stop since I remember. Day and night, a never-ending wedding. But it doesn't seem like he has any attachment to this, nor does he know why the music is playing non-stop. He seems very dismissive about the entire thing, especially when he throws back the wedding invitation to you and it's wet with spit. However, he is the only person who you can show this invitation to. The only thing I can find that would explain the story of this wedding is the protagonist's significant other, who we see in the apartment dream, but she is never mentioned. We can only assume the note that says, "I've made you some soup, heat it up," was written by the protagonist's significant other. There is never any information that elaborates on what the relationship is between them, so it is a stretch of the imagination to say that this was their wedding. However, the reason why I believe this is because there wouldn't be any other explanation to his hallucinations of a dancing bride in the forest. Many of the hallucinations or dreams the protagonist has are personal to him, so personal that these dreams and hallucinations are all possibly real things that happened, which he is slowly remembering. A hallucination that is similar to the wedding and the dancing bride would be when you reach the burned house at the north of the dry meadow. At this location, you overhear a conversation that isn't actually happening. It is most likely a memory. Someone yells, quote unquote, "Out! The truck is here!" And someone else answers with, quote unquote, "No, please." It is unclear which of these voices belongs to the protagonist, but we can identify that this is a memory when we finally reach this location from the old woods. If you look outside your field of view, you will see the burned house as the protagonist remembers it, clean and practically untouched. But when you turn the protagonist's field of view towards the house, you can see that the fence is no longer standing, and now remains knocked over. When you turn towards the tractor, you see how run down it is, and that the wood turned into splinters. Once you enter the house, you can see how destroyed it is, and that some of the furniture is no longer where you remember it. Now the broken ceiling boards are the only thing covering the floor. There's also an example of the protagonist hallucinating people walking by him. However, you see it much later in the game. Along with all of this, having the man at the table repeat, "We've been waiting for you," and the chomper wearing the bride's dress saying, "We've been waiting for you," leads me to believe this could possibly be the protagonist's wedding, which he did not attend due to the fact that he is a part of the quote-unquote outsiders. One thing that could disprove this is if the man at the table is the groom himself. Thank you for listening to Liezar's lore. Last time we had a light goal that didn't work out, so we won't be doing it again. This time, I feel like I could have made this video much better than it is. Please let me know how you feel about it. Goodbye.